Marianne Sciucco, welcome to the Bookaholic podcast.
Thanks so much for having me because I'm a bookaholic.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm so glad. Well, you're a lot of things. You're an
Mhm.
author, you're a fellow podcaster, you're an RN,
Yeah.
so let's dive into your story and what you do so that we can tie all of those things that I just mentioned together.
Okay.
So you wrote a book called Blue Hydrangeas and Alzheimer's love stories.
Yes. It's a
And is that
novel.
your first
Mhm.
book?
It is. Or it
Okay.
was. Yeah.
Well, tell us all about that book, Blue Hydrangeas. And it appeals to me because I love hydrangeas. I've got them
Mm.
all over my yard.
Yeah, yeah. Me too. I love hydrangeas. And when I was coming up with the book, I didn't know what to call it. And it takes place on Cape Cod. And the people in the story, the characters, they own a bed and breakfast. So I was kind of like, what are they going to call the bed and breakfast? So I came up with the name Blue Hydrangeas because they're just so abundant on the Cape and they're that beautiful blue, just
Yes.
so captivating and beautiful. So that's where I
Yes.
came up with the name of the book. So
Right.
it's about
Right.
a couple. They're retired innkeepers, Jack and Sarah, and they've been living like their dream life on the Cape. They opened up a bed and breakfast that they built after they
Mm.
retired, and everything was going great until she started showing signs of impending dementia.
Oh my.
And so
Okay.
for many years, they tried to just say, oh, well, it's senioritis. It's no big deal. These things happen to
Mhm.
people as they age. And then it became more and more untenable. So something had to be done. So she was diagnosed, and slowly but surely, life started to slip away from them. And
Oh,
the story starts with him having to make the decision to have her moved into some type of residential care setting because he could no
mhm.
longer manage it on his own.
Right.
So that's where we start with that story.
Oh, wow. That
Mhm.
story seems so familiar. I have witnessed couples that have gone into that same situation,
Mm,
on a lot of different levels. And, your setting pulls at my heartstrings because I'm
mhm,
very familiar with Cape Cod. I visit there regularly, Eastham,
mhm,
Orleans, and of
mhm,
course, ultimately Martha's Vineyard. So,
mhm.
where does the story take place in the Cape?
Well, their home is in an imaginary village
Oh,
called Falmouthport, which does not really exist, but it's right off of Falmouthport. It's really New Seabury. And
okay.
they end up taking a trip. They make an escape, and they end up in Provincetown.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
at the
so
very tip of the Cape.
yeah,
Always
very end of the earth.
yes, 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 always a great
Yeah,
place to go. I love it there.
yeah.
So, does the couple have children? Are they a childless couple or
No, they have a son. He
Mhm.
is all grown. He's a college professor. He has two children. He lives in Boston, and
Mhm.
he's trying to help as much as he can. But the father, he just kind of keeps him at bay. Doesn't really want any interference. He doesn't want anybody, messing up his system or getting over involved. And
Yeah.
after I had written the first draft, wasn't that long of a story, and it had some elements I thought that were missing. And one was that they seem to have too much of an ideal life. So I thought most people have more than one loss. So I gave them the loss of a child. So they had a teenage daughter who they lost in a drowning incident, which becomes very pivotal toward the end of the story
Oh,
when they're
okay.
trying to escape. They're trying to escape their situation and end up on this drive and heading down to where they used to vacation in the summer, which was near Provincetown in Truro. So you're,
Yes, I
you're
know.
probably familiar with that beautiful
Yes,
area.
I
So that was the scene where they lost their daughter. And
Oh.
it was a memory that she has completely lost.
So I guess the husband, when you're a caregiver, and I have not, well, I've been a sort of a caregiver at one time when my mother was sick, but that was me and a lot of other people
Mhm.
taking care of her. I mean, when someone is ill, it takes so much. And then if you're one person taking care of someone, that's truly overwhelming. But I guess the spouse in this particular, the husband in this particular story was probably trying to recreate or force her to remember. And I think that might even be a stage with people dealing with Alzheimer's victims. They really want them to remember. And he probably thought, surely she would remember that our daughter
Mm.
drowned. And so then she doesn't. And I'm sure that's very heartbreaking to read.
Yeah, he when they were heading in that direction, which was not a plan, and they were getting into that area, he just wanted to go through on the highway and not stop.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
she wanted to stop. She kept saying, "Why can't we go see the old house, their rental house?" So he was just terrified. He didn't want her to remember. He
Oh,
was
okay. Okay.
afraid that if he were to have that memory, he didn't know what to expect from that it would be the undoing. So he was very afraid of that. And when she was at the site where they had been, it had changed over the years. They had never gone back after that event. So it had changed. There was now different houses were there. That house was no longer there. She had no reaction to anything. She said,
Wow.
isn't it beautiful?"
Wow.
And at that moment, he was devastated by the fact that she remembered nothing, but he was relieved. But then he knew that he was the one that had to bear the burden of remembering for both of them.
Yes, most
So it was very
definitely.
hard for him.
Wow.
Mm.
Well, this seems to be like a very difficult subject matter for someone
Mhm.
to write about, and this is their debut novel. And
Mhm.
so, what brought you to this place to want to write this story?
I was always fascinated with people with dementia. I work as a nurse and I worked as a nursing aide in a long-term care facility in a dementia unit
Mhm.
where I cared for many, many people who had different types of dementia, and I enjoyed them. So I would gravitate toward that in my work. So when
Mhm.
I had decided I'm going to write a book, it was a lifelong dream. I came up with this idea and was working that out, and it wasn't going anywhere. And one day at my job, I met this couple that just captivated me. And she had Alzheimer's and was really mixed up. She kept saying that, "Oh, I'm so mixed up." And she was very lovely, and her husband was frail. And the two of them had driven from Florida to New York all by
Mhm.
themselves, which was
Uh,
unbelievable that they managed to make it without any mishaps. But after they got home, she fell and she fractured her pelvis. So that's why she was at the hospital, and she was going to a rehab. So that's where I came in.
oh,
So
okay.
they became the couple in my story. And then I started thinking about other couples that I knew and had assisted, especially where the man was the caregiver for his wife. Because
Mhm.
usually it's the woman that's the caregiver.
Yes.
But I
Mhm.
wanted to explore the role of the male and the
Mhm.
husband and how he had made promises to his wife and he wasn't going to break them, even if it broke him. He
Right.
was gonna maintain his promises, and one of them was that, "I will never leave you," and the other one is, "We're staying right here in their home," because she was
Wow.
afraid that she would be abandoned. So,
Right.
yeah, so that's how I ended up on that topic,
Yeah.
and, it just started spinning in my head, and I started working on it, and it took me a few years to finish it off, but, so many different other elements came in. It's like first they lived in New York, and then I said, no, I want them to be on Cape Cod. And then I made them the innkeepers and
Mhm.
the whole thing about coming up with their children. And I was going to have another daughter because I wanted to have more family friction that
Right.
often accompanies the situation. And I wanted to have like somebody who was, there's always the one who is watching the dollars.
Yeah.
I wanted
There
to
is.
have that character. And then, there's always the one in denial. But
Yes.
I didn't. I just kept it as with this one only son and his wife
Right.
and his children, so that was their family. So,
Yes.
yeah, it just kind of spun its way, into its existence, and, I tried to get it published. I went through the traditional route, and that just
Mhm.
didn't work out for me for
Okay.
numerous reasons. I mean,
Right.
basically what happened was I had had gotten about, I don't know, 50 odd rejection letters from people who never read my book.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's really hard because it's like you
Yeah.
don't even know, like, did I even write a good book?
Right.
I don't even know because nobody ever told me. So people who had read it, friends and family and book club partners,
Mhm.
writing group partners, they thought it was good. So a friend of mine said, "Why don't you publish it on Kindle?" The Kindle was just a new thing at the time.
Oh,
She
yeah.
said, "You got nothing to lose." It was 2013. So I said, I'm going to do that. And it was successful. My
Yes.
definition of success.
Yes. Yes.
People liked it. People were writing reviews. They were all good. Everybody, and it wasn't just people I knew because started to get it out there, and
Right.
I did a little book marketing tour and everything. And one thing leads to another. And, I made a paperback, I made an audiobook.
Okay. Okay.
And it was gaining a little traction, but it's still really hard because the topic, the subject matter is hard.
Well, the subject matter is hard. People think that it might be daunting. Then
Mhm,
sometimes you have to be in the mood to read certain books, and you
mhm.
say, "Okay, Alzheimer's." Then you say, "Oh, I don't want to be sad."
Right.
Yeah, so it just depends, But definitely, you sound like you have a great story to tell. Now, how did you, from being an RN and a professional caregiver, how did you get your writing chops up?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. That was my lifelong goal. And when I
Mhm.
went to college and studied English, and I wanted to learn how to write. So I did all that. I had a job working in the newspaper business for a while, little part-time jobs here and there. Could never really get that job, that was going to be secure me in that field.
Mhm.
So after a few years of that, I was flat out broke and needed to make a change. And at the
Mhm.
time in 1990, there was this huge nursing shortage in the US.
Yes.
And I had been working in corporate and in nonprofit for a while. And I didn't like that at all. I wanted to be in a field where I knew that my labors were going to help people. It was going to be for the good and not just to make money for somebody else. So I decided to try that, which was crazy because I never dreamed of doing anything like that. When I was in high school, I remember having a conference with my guidance counselor. This is 1979,
Mhm.
and options for young women were very slim at the time. And he
Yeah.
said, did I want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a writer." And he said, "Oh," he said, "no, you'll be a nurse. You'll be a good nurse." And I was like, "Well, no, I don't want to be a nurse." But he must have been on to something
He
because
must have
this
been.
is
Those
what but I
guys
mean, back in
tricky.
those days, what did you do? You were a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary.
Yeah.
And that was it. There was just no career paths like there are now. So
Right.
I ended up doing that.
Yes,
And
yes.
it was I'm still working. I still have my
Okay.
license and I still have a job where I'm an RN, but
Right.
I'm getting close to like giving that up.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, do you have any plans of writing any other books?
I'm writing one right now, and I'm going to do a reissue of Blue Hydrangeas because it's going to be 10 years old this year. It's 10 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
So a lot of stuff has happened since then.
Yes.
I helped found AlzAuthors,
Mhm.
and I wanted to include in a forward about AlzAuthors and how this little book ended up, being like the cornerstone of a global organization of writers writing on
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and dementia. So that was a big thing. And then I'd written a prequel to it called Christmas at Blue Hydrangeas because people would write to me and they wanted to know about the inn. Where
Mhm.
can I go to the inn? Are there any more stories about the inn? They were fascinated with it. So I wrote the Christmas book because you got to have a Christmas book.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then and now I'm working on a wedding at Blue Hydrangeas, which is the story of the wedding of the son and daughter. So this happens like many decades before they have Alzheimer's. So
Oh,
then
wow.
I'm going back in time, and then I'm going to include those two books like with the other books. So they, one to follow the two prequels so people can read more about them.
Oh, wow, that sounds
For
wonderful.
that.
You know what that screams to me, right? It screams Hallmark Channel.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be great for Hallmark Channel. It's not long enough though. I tried to do that and the book wasn't long enough, but
I
you never
don't know. The
know.
Hallmark Channel people have have a way of making the stories,
Yeah.
enough if you're willing to sell them, whatever. So, but yeah, that's what that sounds like to me. I would love to read that. That sounds divine, really,
Yeah.
actually. And
Yeah.
really real, that you have all of these things going on, and then, something always usually does eventually happen, in our lives. There's always that last thing,
Yeah.
so that's
Unexpected.
yes, yes, exactly. Now tell us about the global crusade that you're doing, the All's Authors. Tell
Mm.
us more about that and how you got there.
So I mentioned how it was really difficult to, find a market with an Alzheimer's
Mhm.
story. So
Yes.
I had joined this group online on Facebook called Clean Indie Reads, and it was just a collaboration of authors, thousands of authors
Mhm.
who were all writing books that were considered clean, meaning they didn't have a lot of overt sexuality, language, violence, blood and gore, any of that stuff.
Mhm, mhm.
So what we did was we helped one another. We had our own little hashtag, CR4U. Um, we would share blog posts, newsletter swaps, do group promotions, group sales. It was really a big support, and also people helping each other with information on publishing, writing, marketing, all of that relating to authors in this little niche field. So I was doing that for a while, and one day it just dawned on me. I said, gee, I wonder if I got together with some other authors of books about Alzheimer's dementia, if we could do this too. I mean, this is like a really great system and it's working
Right,
well.
right.
I wonder if I could reproduce it for my
Mhm,
books in this topic in particular. So I knew some
mhm.
people who had written books about dementia. So I approached them and they wanted to try. We did it for 1 month.
Right.
And there were 3 of us out of 5 that we really, like, latched onto it, and we didn't know each other. I had met them online. I'd never
Right.
met them in person. They lived in other states, and we
Okay.
just decided, "Why don't we do this and keep it going?" So we did that in 2015. We did it twice, and then we decided in 2016, "Why don't we just have our own blog? And we can feature
Right.
different authors writing these books," and we vetted all the books. And we started doing it once a week, a blog post with a new book, a new author. And then the next thing was we decided we needed to have a bookstore. So we built a bookstore
Oh,
on our website. More people joined in and joined my management team. So right now we have 6 of us that are like all working voluntarily to keep this little engine going. And now
right.
we're up to like, we have about 350 authors, hundreds of books. We have the podcast. We do the podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. We do
Yes.
virtual events. We have panels. We use all our authors. The whole thing
Yes.
exists for the authors to get the books
Yes.
out there to serve the caregivers because they're the ultimate customer is
Right, right.
caregivers for people with dementia who are thirsting for information, for knowledge, comfort, support. So
Yeah.
that's the whole thing behind it. That's what our goal is to get the books that we vet. So it's not every book that comes our way. They're
Right,
carefully researched, and then we present them to the audience of these caregivers who might be looking for something and don't have time to, go to the bookstore or go on to Amazon and see if they can
right,
figure out what they want out of a million books.
right.
And we collect them for them. So we got a
Oh,
lot going on.
wow, that's a tremendous service. Now, a few things that come to mind.
Mhm.
You have a lot of different books. Are most of them nonfiction?
Um, Yes, most of them are nonfiction. A large bulk are memoir. So these are written, more than 90% of the books are written by people who have been on their own personal dementia journey with someone that they love.
Mhm, mhm.
And then there are others who are may have been professionals in the field, people who have dedicated their lives to working
Mhm.
with those families, this population. So they really know what they're talking about. And we have a
Yes.
lot of memoirs. We have caregiver guides, nonfiction,
Mm,
fiction, children's books, books for teens and young adults,
okay,
poetry books, art
okay.
books, photography, journaling books, a lot, blogs. Some of the blogs. We have a couple of films. We're working on bringing in film and
Okay.
other pods, other podcasts.
Got you, got you. Wow, that's
Mm,
tremendous. It's a global outfit,
mhm.
so name some of the countries that we might have, be seeing stories from.
Well, the US, Canada, England, Scotland, um, Australia,
Mhm,
the
mhm.
Philippines, Israel, South Africa,
Wow.
um, Wales, a
Got
lot,
you,
a
got
lot,
you.
Costa Rica,
And
and
how do you get your information out? How do you reel in your consumer, your customer, the caregivers of those affected by Alzheimer's?
we do a lot of social media.
Mhm.
So we're on all the platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And we also use Google ads to
Okay.
reach, try to tap into people searching for books about Alzheimer's or Alzheimer's dementia stories, caregiver
Right.
stories, things like that.
Okay.
And we do a lot of outreach, global outreach, trying to connect with other people in this space or in the writing space or the book space. So it's kind of
Right.
like, more than one prong, because my feeling is always that you're going to find these caregivers in a lot of places, and it might not be in the Alzheimer's place, because maybe
Right.
they're trying to get away from it for a little while. So if they're readers, and they might discover us through their reading channels. So
Mhm.
we talk to, book bloggers and podcasters in the book space, in the Alzheimer's world, healthcare,
Mhm.
podcasts, gone on a
Mhm.
lot of podcasts, and
Right.
doing our virtual events as well, and connecting with a lot of other agencies like
Right. Right.
HFC, Hilarity for Charity. We're involved with them. We do a book club with them every summer. We
Oh,
have connections with assisted living chains, places like
okay.
that,
Okay.
and other entities in the caregiving space, as well as
Got
Alzheimer's dementia. So, those are like the main pillars of how we try to get the outreach. If I had known this when I started, I might have thought twice about even starting, because this is a very difficult audience to reach.
yeah.
It's
Yes. Yes.
there. It's almost impossible.
Yes. Yes.
So
And
yeah,
that's why I was asking the question, how do you get to the people, to bring
yeah,
your wonderful information to them, you know?
it's
It
really
can be
slow.
very difficult.
It's like
Yes.
almost like I I recently visited a support group, an Alzheimer's Association support group, happened to be in my town, and
Mhm.
delivered to them one of our custom caregiver collections, which is a collection of books that were chosen out of our collection specifically for the people in this group. There are about
Mm.
15 titles that came on a handmade bookshelf with our logo and that branding on it, with some
Mhm.
other information. And I met with them and delivered that and got a chance to meet them. But to
Right.
try to do that for every little support group in the United States is not possible.
Yeah, that's
So,
very difficult. No,
it's
it's not.
really hard. If we could
Yes.
just, have like, it's like one article on the Alzheimer's magazine, Alzheimer's Association magazine would probably do the trick, but to get
Yes.
people, yeah, to see what we're doing here. But it's really slow
Exactly.
going. But we just
Well,
keep plugging along.
exactly. Well, your cause is a very worthy one. A lot of people, millions of people need this information. And so I will use my podcast to help get your information
Thank
out
you.
to reach more people. And
Thank
Mary
you.
Ann, we're going to have in the podcast show notes, as well as the description box on YouTube, information about your book, also information about AlzAuthors. It'll all be in the show notes and in the podcast description below the YouTube video. Mary Ann, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. It is indeed, as I said, a worthy cause.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to speak with you today.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. We appreciate it.